Hello, friends. I am Chevy. Welcome to my shed. How are you today? How's life in your world? How's things where you are? I hope it's fantastic. Everything here is great. I brought the Kindle because I wanted to talk about books, but then I'm thinking maybe I don't want to talk about books. Regardless, I want to look at the books that I read last week because I think I read 2 or 3 books last week. If you don't count, maybe just 2 books last week. I guess I could look on Goodreads. So I'm thinking if I'm going to continue to do these little book videos, which I think I will, but I don't want to do like a review every time I read a book. I feel like that's probably, what's the word we learned? Untenable. I think that's untenable for me, and I think that nobody cares that much. So let's see. April 3rd, was that last week? Today's the 9th. Did we talk about the relic? I guess we didn't talk about the relic, did we? I don't know. We'll throw it in here. Yeah, that was last week. Okay. We will throw in the relic into this discussion. There's some magazines. I don't want to talk about the magazines. So we'll talk about these books today, and then tomorrow I have like a book related discussion to talk about. But I read 3, maybe 4 books last week, depending on how you count it. The first 2 I want to talk about are Relic, which is the first book in the Pendergast series from Preston and Child. I think it's Douglas Preston, and I don't remember the other guy's name. This is a supernatural thriller, mystery sort of story that is... I think I gave this a 2. Maybe a 3. Maybe we did talk about this. I don't know. It wasn't good for a lot of reasons. But it was good. This is one of those hard to review things for me because it was like it didn't fit. Did we talk about this? No, we didn't talk about this. Okay. It had an interesting concept. Essentially, an expedition goes into the jungle of South America, I believe it was. I may be wrong about that. Finds to find a tribe that has been, reported to be this whatever, and they don't come back. But they send back some crates. And the vast majority of the story takes place in, actually, almost all of the story takes place inside of New York Museum, like the biggest museum in New York. I don't know, the museum. The museum that's so huge it's hard to describe. And there's been murders there. And so we introduce this team of people that end up investigating this murder. One of them is the titular character, Pendergast, who the series becomes named after. I guess in this book he was kind of like, not a side character, but he wasn't right up front. We mostly follow Marjorie Green, who's like a PhD student or a master's student who's working on her thesis, and this guy who the library hired to write a book about the library, and then this advisor guy. They kind of are the ones trying to figure this whole thing out. And then we have Pendergast, who's an FBI agent from Louisiana. He comes up because he had a similar case down there. And then this police officer, I don't remember his name, whatever. Anyway, it's a standard kind of creepy, weird case. There's some murders happening, but the museum is trying to host a gala for a new exhibit, and it's going to bring in millions, and so they don't want to put it off, and then there's, fights, whatever. Here's the thing, though. It's some of the worst writing I've ever read in my life. Like, worse than amateur level writing, which is really confusing. It has all of the bad things you should never do as a writer, between jumping tenses in your verb tenses, jumping heads between sentences, like perspective shift constantly, really wild premises in some sections. Just, it's bad. It's really bad. But the story progresses in an interesting way. My biggest, it's very slow. This is a huge book. It took me 4 days or 3 days to read, which is a big book, but really nothing happens in all that time. There's a whole lot of like character story that's going on between everybody, but it's the tropiest, like so over the top, slap you in the face kind of trope that it feels almost cartoonish. I swear we talked about this because I definitely talked about, maybe we didn't, whatever. It's definitely not on my video list, so it just feels cartoonish, just over the top bad. And I went from that to a book called Still Life, a Chief Inspector Gamache novel from Louise Penny. I've been recommended this series, and I wanted to give it a shot. It is kind of fits into the sort of cozy mystery genre where there's mysteries, but it's in this quaint little town, and everybody's just happy, and everybody gets along, and it's so nice. And that's the book, essentially. That's the entire book. There's been a murder. Well, there's been a death. They're not even sure it's a murder in the beginning of the book. They eventually decide that it is, and it's this artist who gets killed, and it goes down this path. Again, this is another series where there's 20 books in this series. And so I will at some point give it a second shot. In fact, I started to read the second one, but I've already gotten bored with it. It is similar to The Relic in the sense that the writer's just not very good. We jump perspectives between paragraphs. It's really confusing to keep up with that. There is some really awkward dialogue and some really awkward character motivations where you're just like, it's kind of weird. But overall, this one I think I gave 4 stars because it's actually a comfortable little story. It tells the story of this quaint little Quebec town going about their business and trying to deal with the death of a very loved member of their town. I guessed it less than halfway through. I knew the ending, and I was right. And so I don't know what that says about the book or me. I don't particularly find myself to be like a really good crime solver or anything like that. I don't normally have all the answers to a mystery until it's like almost hitting you in the face. But I figured this one out pretty early on. Whatever. But again, it felt comfortable. It's just a kind of a comfortable read. Despite, I really hate that perspective jumping where you're like, what is happening? Like, and on top of perspective jumping, there'll be multiple characters speaking in the same paragraph, and you have to try to figure out which bubble is whose. You should always have separate paragraphs for dialogue. If a new character speaks, new paragraph. Period. It's really weird when you do that. I don't like it. But again, she's got 20 books. I'll probably read more. If I don't finish the number 2 this week, I'll just kind of put it on hold because it is a little bit awkward to read because of those problems, but it is a comfortable little story about a quaint little town, and I do enjoy that sort of thing. And I'm kind of working on in that same sort of vein for my book, but definitely darker. Definitely not quaint. Okay, and so the last 2 books I read over the weekend, I bought The Mist. I'm counting it as a book. It's 44,000 words. That's practically a novel. It was 100 and some pages. I think anything over 100 pages I consider a book. That's a book, right? The Mist from Stephen King. I bought it. It was like 99 cents. Hey, try this out. I said, sure. Why not? I've always wanted to read it. I definitely remember the TV series. It was like a 2-part thing. And I remember the movie, but I don't know that I saw the movie. I might have from the 80s. I guess there's been a new version. I'm not sure. I think I've read this before, but I'm not positive. I don't own the collection that it's in or anything, so I don't. But it felt more familiar than it should. But it's a simple little kind of found footage story about basically the end of the world kind of thing, and the main character is telling his story from the start of this storm that brings in this fog, the mist, and then is trying to survive that storm inside of a grocery store with like 70 other people. There's some deaths and whatnot, and monsters, like straight up straight up monsters like bugs and spiders and huge walking beasts with multi tentacles, and you know, and anyway, the guy's writing it on some stationery and leaving it at the front desk when he leaves this hotel, because they ended up getting away from the supermarket and trying to find a way out of this mist. And it's up to you to, you know, there's never any resolution. It's just kind of, again, found footage kind of sort of thing. I enjoyed it, but it wasn't spectacular. It was good. Lots of interesting little character thoughts, lots of interesting little themes. But what I did like, with that book, I got a preview of Stephen King's next book called You Like It Darker, which is a collection of like 12 stories. And they included one complete story in here, which I think it was longer than The Mist. When I finished The Mist, I was only at 46% done with the book, and then this whole other story took up the rest. So I'm counting it as a book, and it was called Danny Coughlin's Bad Dream. I really enjoyed that story. It was super interesting. It was a story about a guy who woke up with a bad dream that he couldn't get out of his mind. He envisioned seeing a body. He goes to the body. It's there. The dream plays out exactly as he thought. And so he turns in the body. And then the rest of the story is him being accused, or not arrested, but him being dogged by the Kansas Bureau of Investigation and whatever else. And it's more about him against this investigator than this dead body. And it ends up this investigator has some sort of mental break problem, keeps kind of harassing the main character. All that sort of stuff happens. I really enjoyed that story. It was really fun to read. It was just a character piece, but it had a good premise. It had a solid ending. You felt good about it. And I really felt like Danny, the main character, I felt like I knew that guy. Like he's a janitor at a high school. He's just kind of run down on his luck. He used to be an alcoholic. He's recovering. He lives alone in a trailer park and has a sometimes, fling with one of the other people in the trailer park. They're not really, partners, or they're not in a relationship. They just kind of hook up once a week. And I totally see this guy. Like I used to work in the school system. I see that guy. I know that guy, and I felt for that guy. I felt a lot for that guy throughout this story. I felt there's some commentary on police tactics, maybe not tactics, police misconduct. There's some, Stephen King didn't hold any punches in that story, but I really enjoyed it. So I've been looking forward to his newest collection. I enjoy short story collections. I read them quite often from my favorite authors, and I subscribe to a few short story magazines that we might. I don't think we've talked about those. We might talk about those sometime soon. But anyway, those are the 4 things I read last week. Definitely can recommend The Mist if you haven't read it, but also I would recommend the next Stephen King book just to read Danny Coughlin's Bad Dream. I thought it was really cool. Got any questions about these books? Anything you want to talk about book related, or any books you want me to read? Put that in the comments or call me or text me. Numbers at the end of the show. Thank you for being here as always. Thank you for liking, commenting, subscribing, being amazing friends and wonderful people. I really appreciate you. And I'll see you again tomorrow. Today's word you should know sounds smart is urbanization. It's a noun meaning the growth of cities brought about by population shift from rural areas and small communities to larger ones. Urbanization, which began in the United States in the late 1800s, was triggered by the shift from an agricultural economy to an industrial one. Urbanization, U-R-B-A-N-I-Z-A-T-I-O-N. Are we in a point now where urbanization is more about people leaving overpopulated areas and turning more remote areas into urban areas? I feel like that happens a lot.